This is a Sports Catastrophe production.
Hey there, Heather Ho there, it's Jeff Cutter Diamond welcoming you to another Sports Catastrophe on this day. And on this day, March the 2nd, 2012, Major League Baseball put up a big shock to purist baseball fans as they announced a expansion to the postseason format. Now, the postseason format hasn't always been the 7 teams per league or even 6 teams per league. It used to be down to 2 teams, even 4. But in 2012, they moved from 8 teams to 10 teams for the postseason, 5 from the AL, 5 from the NL. Now, the history of the postseason is big. Back in 1903, when the World Series started, it was just your standard American League champion against National League champion. And that was that for 65 years. It was the same format. Only 2 teams got to the playoffs. That would be for the World Series. No other stupid playoff rounds. Capiche? Well, baseball decided by 1969, after all, they did expand by 2 teams in the American League and the National League to make it 2 12-team leagues, that they decided to have 12 teams fight in 2 divisions, making 6 teams per division, and making the winners of the division face each other in a best-of-5 series called the League Championship Series, and the winner of those would face the World Series. You didn't necessarily have to have the best record. You could be like an underdog, like the second best record, and still make the World Series. So that's what was be brought. And that format lasted until 1984 when they changed it to a best of 7 for the LCS. You still had 4 teams, but you just had to win. You had to win 4 to move on to the World Series, not 3. And then in 1993, they decided to expand for the 94 season and have a wild card team in each league. After all, they did expand to 14 teams in each league. So they decided to put 3 divisions. 2 divisions had 5, 1 had 4. The winners of those 3 divisions, plus the best record of any team that did not win the division, would meet in a playoff series called the League Division Series. Of course, we all know in 94 that it didn't happen because of the whole kerfuffle of the strike. So 95 was the first year that it was implemented. And the wild card proved to be huge, as the Yankees were the wild card team in the AL and almost took care of the Seattle Mariners to win the title. So anyway, that was the big part, is that the wild card and all that. And that format had stood for 16 years. But possibly because of a major event in 2011, when the final day of the 2011 baseball season actually had major implications for the wild card. There were a few division things, but the wild card was the main thing. Boston and Atlanta had practically sewn up the wild card spots and all that. However, both teams suffered massive collapses and massive comebacks by both the Tampa Bay Rays and the St. Louis Cardinals, respectively. So the Tampa Bay Rays were hosting the Yankees on the final day of the 2011 season, whereas Boston was in Baltimore. They were tied. Boston and Tampa were technically tied. So if Boston won and Tampa won, then if Boston had won and Tampa had lost, then it would be a 1-game winner take all for the wild card. Hold on. Oh no, wait a minute. Boston won and Tampa won. Then we're tied and go to a 1-game playoff. Boston had a chance to win, but then there was a rain delay, and normally a rain delay of such a long length would mean that the game would be taken out, and that anything was possible. But unfortunately, Boston faltered in the bottom of the 9th, losing the game, and then Tampa, after being down 7-0 to the Yankees, actually won their game, shocking a lot of people. And moving on to the wild card spot. Whereas in the National League, Atlanta needed to beat Philly and have St. Louis falter against Houston. St. Louis easily manhandled Houston, so all Atlanta could do was win and force a one-game playoff with the Cardinals. Unfortunately, though, they lost in extra innings, and St. Louis would use that momentum in the wild card to win the 2011 World Series in Game 7 against the Rangers. It was just that impressive. So, baseball, I guess, buoyed by those comebacks and by the fact that they owed it to Boston and Atlanta, decided to put another team in the playoffs. But how would you work with 5 teams in each division? Simple. The 2 top teams that did not win their division would get wildcard spots, and the team that hosts the team that has the first wild card, the most wins by a non-division winner, would host a one-game playoff against the second best team, and that winner would go to the wild card, be the wild card berth, and go on to face the top team in the AL or NL, depending on where you are. So that format happened for years, and it was always that way until COVID hit. And then that's when baseball went their shortened season, decided to go with 7 teams per thing. Or 8. Was it 8 or 7? I think it's 8. And all that. So they went with 8. And then they decided to go with 7. And then this past season, they went with 6 teams per league. So the top 2 teams would get a bye into the divisional series. And the other 4 teams would play in wild cards to decide who would get those 2 spots for the LDS in the first place. So that's what happens with all these postseason formats. It's kind of confusing, but the fact of the matter is, I think they just wanted an extra team in and make it more special. Now, the wildcard game has brought in some great revenue and some great matchups, including 2014 when the Royals were hosting Oakland, and Oakland had a golden chance to take out Kansas City in KC, but they lost in extra innings. And let's not forget the Blue Jays against the Orioles, and Edwin Encarnacion's 3-run home run in the 11th inning to win the game and bring the Blue Jays to the playoffs against Texas for revenge. Well, not really revenge, but to try to beat them again. So the wildcard game has brought some great joy and all that. The 2012 wildcard game in the National League, as a result of this, St. Louis and Atlanta, St. Louis would not have had a chance to make the playoffs again. Atlanta would have been the wildcard team in 2012 and finally get what they deserved from last year. But the fact of the matter is that game was controversial because of that infield fly rule, which didn't really happen in the infield in the first place. But, yeah, it was costly, but it was fun. Anyhow, I'm Jeff Diamond.